Hello everybody and welcome to another video. This week we're going to do a super simple fix of a Land Raider, which hopefully inspires you to fix a few of your old models. Let's get going. So I've had this old Land Raider in a cupboard for a very long time, which I got secondhand from a fellow on a Winters SEO Discord. As you can see, the front door is broken, it's very dusty, there are a few cobwebs, the barrels need drilling, and it's looking a little bit sorry for itself. So the first thing we need to do is clean it up, and you'll be surprised how much of a difference this makes. I took a big soft brush and tried to get most of the dust off of the top. As you can see, the model isn't actually badly painted at all, so we're going to be able to utilise 90% of the paint job, which is really cool, especially as you can see the nice gradients down the side of the tank, which I think are really nicely done. So we're kind of quids in with this one. The next thing I did was glue the front assault ramp closed. Now, normally I don't do this, I let things swing open, but as you can see, the hinge was damaged. So this is the only way to make sure that it's going to stay together in the future. Using a bit of super glue activator, I made sure there was a strong bond and it won't come off again. Then, taking some of the cupulas from the Horus Heresy vehicle upgrade sprue, that's the sprue that comes in all the Horus Heresy vehicle kits, I made sure that those big holes on top of the model were filled. Normally I'd add a few other things like melters and so on, but unfortunately I've actually completely run out of multi-melters. It seems that whenever I have the chance to use them on a vehicle, I do, so I don't have them available for this specific project. So there won't be a multi-melter added to this, but that's something you can absolutely add later. And if you have one and you're doing some kind of similar restoration, then feel free to add it. Land Raiders have them, and they're free now. Whilst I add these cupulas, it is worth coming out on record that I really like the Horus Heresy upgrade sprues. I do recommend that if you can get some on eBay or find something like that without having to buy the full tank, unless you want the full tank, in which case go ahead and do that, do pick up some of those spare parts because they're so good at making both your Heresy vehicles and your 40k vehicles look so good. Once those hatches were on, I moved across to the heavy bolter and added some gun barrels. This is completely optional, you don't have to do this, you could just paint a little black circle on, that's fine. I like to drill the barrels though. So using my WOW stick, which is a little rotary tool I got from Amazon, I've put a link in the description because people are always asking, and my hobby blade, I drilled a pilot hole and then scraped my knife around to make these a little bit larger, before going in with a larger drill bit on the WOW stick to make sure that the barrels looked nice and chunky. After all, it's shooting 40mm grenades. Sometimes you just got to sit back and remember how cool bolters are. The drill bit got stuck at one point, so I just had to reset the chuck and it was fine. After that, I went to painting, and yes, I am putting Black Legion contrast paint directly onto grey plastic. Don't at me, in this situation it does work. Realistically, I shouldn't have glued these on, I should have taken them outside, primed them, painted them, and then glued them to the tank, but I'm going to be honest guys, I'm lazy. I just wanted this to be done. So I painted directly over the plastic, 2 coats of contrast paint and some varnish, and it was absolutely fine. Whilst I was painting the black areas, I also used this opportunity to touch up the heavy bolters at the front who were looking a little bit dusty, and a fresh lick of paint on the black areas really helped them pop again. Now, as we've established, this is a super simple rescue job. We're not doing anything crazy. If you do want to see some more crazy looking things, there's a link in the top right to another Land Raider I rescued for my Black Templars, which has loads of cool stuff all over it. As for this model, we're now on fully to the painting, and as you can see, the model's pretty well painted already. I got very lucky there when I picked this guy up. So all I'm going to do is help it pop. All over the top panels, I'm going to take Baal Red contrast paints, which has become one of my favourite paints for painting Blood Angels. What we're going to be doing with this contrast paint is thinning it down ever so slightly and glazing it all over those big flat areas on top. This is going to help the transition between the nice gradients that the previous owner made on the side and the somewhat dull looking part on top that has only been made dull by years of neglect. I'm going to be honest, it's been sat in a cupboard for a while. I really like this effect. It's a really hot red, if that word can be used, we're not referring to pink. Really bright, really vibrant, really saturated, and is easily one of my favourite things to apply as a filter over pre-existing colours, which is exactly what we're doing here. Other colours I like to do this with is if I've highlighted up blacks with blues, I like to do a nice glaze of Pterodon turquoise over the panels to make it pop. Greens can often look really vibrant with some warp lightning, which is another great contrast paint, and likewise blues you can use something like Talisar blue or ultramarine blue or whatever. I'll be honest, I don't use blue contrast paints all that often. That's not because they're bad, that's just because I don't have too many blue armies, that's all. Now you can see as the rest of the paint is starting to dry as I'm glazing over the final few areas, which includes the sponsons on the side of the tank, that the contrast is really bright compared to the rest of the tank. When I put this down flat, you'll see that it works brilliantly as a highlight. As you can see here, I think that's a really nice look. Even as the paint's just starting to dry, you've got the slightly duller sides and then the bright top, which is exactly where the sun would be hitting this thing. You know, presumably if they're fighting on a world with a sun and not some kind of asteroid or something. After doing all that, I went back to adding a bit more black to a few areas that I'd forgotten about, specifically the little area around the heavy bolter, and then doing the exact same thing on the black areas that the previous owner had marked out, just to help them brighten up a little bit. Using black to brighten up doesn't make sense, but it does look tidier. That's what I mean. Now on to one of my new favourite paints, which is from Duncan's Too Thin Coats range. This is Dragon's Gold, which is almost exactly the same as Retributor Armour, which is one of my favourite golds from GW, but the pot dried out. That's a standard story on this channel, right? The pot's always drying out. So this stuff coming out of a dropper bottle is absolutely awesome, and I do recommend if you like that shade of gold to pick this up because it's a little bit easier to work with. The Blood Angels love their gold, so I did several gold areas where there were metallics before, and also touched up a few areas I'd accidentally got red onto. Then I took some Wild Rider Red from Citadel and did a nice edge highlight all over most of the areas. I didn't go too wild on this one, after all it's just a quick rescue job. That said, this wasn't rushed. I still made sure to line most of the panels because this is a really important step in helping the tank look really vibrant. Honestly, the only areas I missed are those little areas that look like boxes on top there. You see them, they've got the dark lining in. I just kind of left those alone this time, whereas normally I would highlight them. And honestly, I didn't notice that much of a difference. Then I took Ungor Flesh and did the sharpest areas on the uppermost areas of the tank. I really like this paint and I think it's what really helps the reds pop. Doing the exact same thing for my greys, I used Dawnstone all over the black areas. Again, love this paint for quick highlights. If you want to do multiple highlights, then you'll use multiple greys, but just for one quick sharp highlight, Dawnstone cannot be beat. And with the edge highlights coming to an end, we're basically at the point where we can just start adding a few little details, including lenses and headlights. I always like doing these, they add a nice bit of colour to the tank, especially the yellow, which contrasts nicely with the red, and then a bit of green all over the lenses, because again, Blood Angels also like their green for lights. We're really on the downward slope now, and one thing that I didn't film that I do want to mention is I did also add a few extra metallic textures over those areas that needed it, using Vallejo's Dark Aluminium. Moving on to the exhausts, I took some Seraphim Sepia, and then some Agrax Earthshade, and finally some Druchii Violet to create a nice burned effect all over the back of these. It's a little bit cartoony, but again the whole tank is bright and edge highlighted, so I think it really suits the vibe that I'm going for, and also adds a nice bit of purple to an otherwise very red and gold tank. One of the final things I'm going to be doing is adding transfers, and I think this really helps the entire model pop right at the end. I had this nice black and gold transfer that for some reason, despite being a new transfer, just fell apart the instant I put it on the tank, and despite my efforts to try and save it, I couldn't make it work, so I had to remove it and replace it with a standard matte black Blood Angels logo, which made me a little bit sad, but hey, no point crying over spilt transfer, or whatever. I then added this nice big yellow number 1, which again I think helps contrast nicely with the red of the tank and looks really cool. And then, as mentioned, added that normal Blood Angel symbol on that door where the other transfer had failed me. I then took a look at this campaign badge that I'd added previously, and I wasn't too fond of where it was. It just seemed to stick out quite a lot. So whilst it was still fresh, I managed to take it off and move it to the side of the tank. I thought it looked quite nice up here. I do think transfers are such a great way of helping your tank pop without too much effort, especially with all these large flat panels. Adding the company symbol, which I believe this is the second company, I made sure that that was also proudly displayed. Realistically, I wanted to put it on the side of the door where I'd put the number 1, and I tried to make that happen, but the number 1 started to rip immediately, and I decided that was a bad idea, and went back to putting the blood drop where it was supposed to be. Now this was a nice simple video, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I also hope it's inspired you to get those tanks or models that you've had sat in your cupboard for way too long, get them out, fix them up, get them on the battlefield, making war as they should. As always, I hope you enjoyed this. I've been Sam. See you next time.